Hello, Star Lovelies. It's a great time to be a soul. Today we're talking about.
We've been taught that leadership is about being louder, faster, and in control, about standing in front and being seen. And that model is collapsing. And what's in its place? It's a deeper, more intuitive power that's rising, and it already lives inside of you. And there's the opportunity to be a different kind of leader, one that's unique to your own style and your own energy and your own motivation. Here's the second installment of the Future Trends for Visionary Rebels episode series that I'm doing. And this one is the end of alpha leadership, why top-down control is dead and what comes next. And I'm Kim Woods, master astrologer and business strategist, and your soul's permission slip to lead, create, and succeed in ways the old world could never imagine. The last time we were in this series, we talked about the great collapse. And today we're going to go deeper into the collapse of alpha leadership. We're going to be diving into the transformation of leadership and power from those outdated force-based models of that ever-achieving expansion, ROI, KPIs, metrics, to the embodied energetic authority. And I am so excited because think about this. This is kind of mind-blowing. What if the traits that made you a successful leader, I'm going to do the quotes around that you are now are the very things that are blocking your evolution? Seriously, I paused on purpose. Think about it. Leadership, true leadership is being rewritten. So let's look at what alpha leadership, I'm going to say was. I can't quite say was yet, but I'm going to do that. And then let's look at why it's failing. So this is the thing. It was built on a myth. It was like that lone genius, the hero's story. It was about command and control and certainty without being curious, and like hustle, 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 work, 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 pay your dues, keep your nose to the grindstone. There was nothing about healing or releasing or letting go. There was charisma, but it was at the expense of other people. So you had to be the only one that the light was shining on. Where's the collaboration in that? The old leadership model told you had to be the loudest one in the room, the tallest one in the room, the most controlling. And the more controlling you were, the more safe you were. It had to be visibility that was performative without being resonant. And it was power that meant dominance and hierarchy. Once again, I'm going to use that word hustle. I could use the word effort or work. That's not leadership. That's all survival. And so we're here now because there's a new way forward. This new way honors resonance that leads to recognition, alignment that leads to authority, and presence that leads to performance. I like alliteration. So the alpha leader, that archetype is no longer sustainable. And this is especially true for those of us who would identify with either soul-led or intuitive or heart-based leadership, or those that see them as visionary, as rebels or paradigm shifters or trailblazers. This is also for those who see yourself as healers or intuitives. Even though the language that I use is much more business-based, if you are an intuitive and you're looking to make impact in the world, I'm just going to tell you, you're most likely going to have a business. So this is something you're going to want to lean into. And here's the deal. Before, the way the stars were and the way the collective destiny was written was that we could succeed this way. But as you've noticed, the last few decades have been fewer people wanting to strive for this success, less satisfaction, less ease, more angst. And that's literally the way that the stars have written this in the sky. You know, I've done it too. Like, I was rewarded for being sharper, faster, and more prepared than anybody else in the room. But what if that is the wrong room? What if that's no longer your room? What if that's the room your soul absolutely doesn't want to be in, right? I've been trying to remember things for you guys on this podcast series, and remembering stories I've already written when I was working at the PR firm from 2020 to 2020 2 or 3. It was a while. I wrote 9 3 or 4-part stories that went through switching from the boardroom to the intuitive cushion in a yoga studio, or something like that. And yet I didn't want to tell the same story, so I had to, like, really go back into, like, my memory bank and come up with different remembrances of stories that I was dealing with from a leadership lens. And so this one I didn't remember for a while. It took me a while to recall it. And I remember it was pre-Oracle. It's because that's where I went after this happened. And so I was in financial planning, which means that I ran financial models and budgeting for a corporation. And so it wasn't huge. It was about $250 million, which compared to solopreneurs is really big. But in the whole scheme of, companies, it wasn't that big. So it had a really good vibe of you being able to get into the room of the C-suite because, it was a smaller company, right? So technically big, but not that big. And so I did. I had a seat at the table because I was running finance. And so finance, we had to put the numbers together. So I was in the boardroom all the time and I was giving advice about what would happen, those levers, right? Like, well, if you take budget away from here, this is what's going to happen. This is how it's going to cascade through the company. If you take it from, here, or you augment sales over here, this is what's going to happen. This is what you're going to need. This is the modeling, whatever. It was super fun. I loved it. And yet it was in that exhaustive model, right? So I was really sought after in this role because I could work miracles. Had a really small team and we had an awful lot of deadlines that were ridiculous. And a new CFO came in and he decided that was going to be really cool. And I remember, okay, it's early 90s, guys, so I'm dating myself here. He thought it was really cool that he could go home and watch Law and Order because it was new then. And he loved it. And I'm going to make up what time it was on. It was either on from 9 to 10 or 10 to 11. I can't remember. And he would come back after that and expect the entire team to still be there. Let's just pause and say how ridiculous that is. He also, in his religion, left early on Fridays, but he then was around on Sundays. So he had no trouble calling everybody on Sunday morning and expecting them to drop everything like literally at a moment's notice and come back and just do work. It was ridiculous. And so I had done a lot of things and I had, gotten a lot of a goodwill built because I had always met the deadlines and all the other things, right? But my team was fracturing. Quite frankly, I was fracturing. And so I went into the CEO at one point who had said to me, if there's ever anything you need, just let me know. So it was about 6 months I was dealing with the CFO, this brand new CFO, and it was bad. So I thought to myself, okay, Jack had said, come on into his office, make an appointment, come into his office, talk to him. I remember it was later on a Friday, probably like 5:30, 6 o'clock on a Friday night. So, you're like, okay, I have this space. I'm going to have half a weekend here. Excellent. And so I told him what was going on. And he just looked at me and he just said, you know what? I don't get involved with the day-to-day staff, and then he went on to mansplain me. And I would have loved to have had that term at the ready back then, but I didn't. And then, blah, 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 about why he couldn't do it. And then he said, did you get everything you need? Right? Like, sure. And so I said yes, because it's the only thing I could say. But I remember being so disappointed. I can picture myself walking out of that office and just knowing that this was the end. Like it had to be the end because I had worked through my final solution that I had, walking into the president/CEO's office and going over the head of your, CEO or CFO, excuse me, and asking, he said, just come in, ask for anything you need. Oh, nope, didn't mean it. And so this is where this model's broken. Nope. I was like, absolutely not. Not only is this model broken, I am broken. So I did what anybody, I went, I looked for a job. I was like, I just can't do this. And so I did. It took me a few months, but I got the job. I got my dream job at Oracle. And then I realized that in that time, as I was doing those interviews and whatever, and it was like, I didn't know probably at the time. I can say it now, and I just did. The system was broken. I just thought I was broken. But that time away, that time of looking, that separation, that taking the lens and saying, with those few months, like, this is ridiculous. I'm working all these hours. This is absurd. And then realizing, no, the system's broken. Let's go look for a whole new thing. And so I got the job. I gave my notice. Of course, the CEO was devastated. And then, oh my God, he came flying into my office, sat down, closed the door. And he was like, anything you need. Oh my God, give me more staff, give me a ridiculous offer for a raise, which he did, everything I want. And he's like, what else can I do to make you stay? And I looked at him and was like, Jack, I've gotten everything I need. And I could feel he intake a breath, his eyes widened, and he looked at me, and I looked at him deep in his soul, and he knew. He's like, I screwed up. And I'm like, yeah, dude. Didn't say it, no words. And I left, and he remembered. He remembered what he had said to me, and he remembered that he screwed up, but it was too little too late. And so what I took away from it was that it isn't always about you, the person. There are sometimes when things are broken that are outside of you. That was first. The second thing I took was that I didn't ever want to be a leader in this way. I could say then I was a little bit of a baby leader. The biggest team I had at that point was probably a handful of people, 4, 5, 6, 7. I went into Oracle, had an astronomically, stratospheric career there, and was leading tons of people. Let me just say tons of people. And I did it with a leadership method and a model that was different, always putting the potential, anchoring the energy, being the role model, of course, but knowing whether I was leading from the front, the middle, or the back. I learned so much about leadership looking at what people were doing wrong and then doing it entirely my way. So I've been doing this for decades. So for me, when I look at leadership, I'm like, finally. Hello, fellow intuitive visionaries. People are finally catching up. It's awesome. So the traditional sense of leadership is failing, and it's not solely masculine. There's got to be that relief of the feminine there too, because the masculine, that controlling, ever growing, focused on the bottom line, directive, top down. That model doesn't work by itself. I'm not even going to go to the feminine way of leading wholly, because that doesn't work either. It's the combination that's really important, because when you combine the feminine and the masculine, that's where you get the new era. That's what I've been talking about for years now. And sneak peek, you guys, getting to the heart of it, my new book, The New Era Millionaire, Uncharted Success for the Visionary Rebel, is coming out on June 25th. I am so excited because you incorporate that feminine, and I talk about it all through the book. That's when you have cooperation and collaboration and influence, and that's where you have the potentiality and the possibility. And this is where the influence is on many layers. It's not that top-down pyramid. So think remote teams, cosmic timing, AI disruptions. The planets are speaking and they're saying, join in this together. This is in harmony and in complementary ways, but it also can be intense and invigorating. So this is going to be a really crazy comparison. It was just Easter weekend. I had the whole family together, and life happens, right? And then you think, holy crap, like this is a really good thing. I was framing these podcast episodes, and like I said in the first one, it takes me hours to do this. I don't know I have to take all the planets and then take practical things and think of stories and all the things, whatever. It takes me a while. Of course, I use AI to help me formulate these things, but it starts with me and it starts with my own stories, right? So I'm like, okay. Nick said at one point, like, the pollen count is the highest it's ever been in Atlanta. We talk about allergies. It's springtime here in New England. And so I was like, oh my goodness, the pollen count is higher than whatever. And I was, why? I don't know that I've ever asked why. Sure, like you just kind of have this, oh, it's the highest pollen count ever. And you just kind of, next year, highest pollen count ever. But why? And then Nick said something that I've since researched, because he told me to make sure it was right, that there is a model of planting in cities and towns and universities and probably companies, that their landscape is planted with mostly male trees and bushes and plants, because they're not invasive. They don't seed each other. They don't fruit. They don't leave like a lot of waste, if you will, on the bottom, right? They bloom in a certain, time frame. They're pretty predictable that way. This is all masculine energy everywhere. And they kind of stay in their own lane. And the feminine is messier and is invasive, and it will grow and reach to the edge, and it will seed itself and bear fruit and all those other things. Well, guess what? The pollen that the male releases when he blooms is astronomically higher than the pollen that the female releases when she blooms. And oh, by the way, she absorbs the male pollen. So in the absence of the feminine, the male has just now made allergies really, really bad for everybody. Isn't that terrible? Whereas, you know what, if we all only had feminine trees, guess what? They wouldn't be pollinated and they wouldn't really grow anyway. So this is why you need both. So I know that that seems like a really ridiculous story to tell, but it is so incredibly, you can picture it, right? Like you can envision this and hopefully you can remember it, because this is the same thing that we're talking about when we're talking about the alpha driven leadership, where we can all say, oh, yay, great. And then we don't know what to replace it with. So I'm going to go through the cosmos and I'm going to talk about that replacement. So you've been hearing me talk about Pluto in Aquarius, Neptune in Aries, Uranus in Gemini, but I'm looking through that leadership lens instead of the other lenses that I've looked for. So again, Pluto in Aquarius from 2024 to 2044, it does decentralize power. But this is where it's networking over hierarchies. So these are my terms. Think of microcosms and pods and little mini economies and self-contained ecosystems at the local or the niche levels. Think about tiny communities tied together through shared goals or like-minded people. And the reason why I say that these are my words is that I don't think you're going to be able to go out there and type in Google and say, oh, I'm looking for a little microcosm, right? Or a pod. Sure, but no. But that's what you can help when you picture this, these little bubbles that work in unison or work in invigorating ways or in like-minded ways. And so this is where the power shifts from individuals to communities. And the hierarchies collapse, but the networks rise. And technology plus intuition shape the influence. Now, Neptune in Aries, 2025 through 2039, it ends that illusion-driven ambition. It awakens self-trust. It turns us from that dazed and confused, kick the can down the road mentality that Neptune had in Pisces from 2011 to 2025, and it brings us into a full awareness of what's in front of you. So think about this from a leadership lens. Soul identity becomes the source of leadership. I think that's awesome. And there's no more spiritual bypassing. Embodiment is required. And so when we're looking at other planets here, Uranus and Gemini, think about new frontiers that we can now be seeking for solving complex problems, for understanding how duality and polarity can work together in unison for unexpected or brilliant outcomes. This is where we then take those ecosystems and we say, ooh, you know what? We're not just going to bring homogenous communities together. We're going to be bringing diverse communities together, and we're going to be relying on each other's strengths in ways that are inclusive. That's where the Pluto in Aquarius comes in. And so that's really exciting. If we look how Saturn can then lead into that Neptunian and Aries energy from a leadership perspective, this is where we're looking at integrity and responsibility and making the right decision, whether people are looking or not, right? That's the integrity. That's alignment too, when we bring it more into that soul level with that Neptune combination. Think about what leaders are going to be doing then as role models. That's really exciting. And then when we look at Jupiter in Cancer over the next year, we're going to be looking at emotional intelligence as being the new leadership currency, and people following others who make them feel seen and safe and sovereign. This is so exciting. This is where we have that performative power dissolving and that energetic authority rising. So let's just kind of dial this down into like 2 or 3 sentences here. You don't need to lead with status, but you lead with presence. You don't command the room, you calibrate the room. And this becomes your power base, where power is fluid. And you can bring in that ancient remembrance of the way the energies and that beautiful feminine wisdom with that beautiful advanced technology of the masculine, and the weaving together is just a rewiring. It's a rewiring to lead through the embodiment, the trusting of what's true versus the control and the fear-based models. Get rid of the lack and the urgency and you're going to be left behind and all that other nonsense, right? Like this is just crap. If I go through like what my clients are dealing with right now, we are still, even though they're being led through their souls, and even though I am leading them and I can see where the next step is and the next step after that, it is still unknown territory, right? Like this hasn't been written yet. And so even though we can say, okay, the star is right, the fate, but yet the destiny is unwritten. We are co-creators. We write that destiny. The stars are awaiting our instruction. And so that's a lot of responsibility, but there's tons of freedom in there. That's a lot of, could feel heavy, but there's huge lightness and possibility. So when I think about what they're going through, there's a lot of recalibration that's happening on the fly. And I'm just kind of moving my hands back and forth together just to say, like, we talk about knitting the plane while we're in flight, and hopefully it's a plane we're knitting, right? Well, when your soul leads, it's a plane. But it doesn't mean that the soul has every single construct that it needs. Because remember, the soul doesn't have hands and feet and being able to type and put things together. There's still that human element that's really important. So the mind is still really involved. So there are times when you're like, I said this last week, like you're looking at things that you're just off 5 degrees. Well, the way things are going to be moving so rapidly, that 5 degrees becomes 50 degrees really quickly. So that realignment keeps coming in, and the realignment keeps coming in, the realignment keeps coming in. This is one of the reasons why I set up my Rich and Powerful Leaders Academy 2 years ago. I kind of formulated it in my head 2 years ago. I really didn't launch it until probably 6 or 8 months after that. So it's been about a year, a little over a year and a half that I've been doing it. And so I did it because I wanted there to be more frequency that people could see me. Because when my clients are in a one-on-one container, they see me once a month, typically. Every once in a while, I have a client that goes to a higher level and sees me twice a month. But for the most part, it's once a month. And they either see me alone or in teams, whatever their package that they've said yes to. But they have Voxer, which means that they can message me in between times, but not really so much, because then it would be another session. And, then it would be, let's go into another session or whatever. So there is communication, but it's not as frequent as I was knowing that this time would require. And in order to come to me one-on-one for that type of frequency, it would be an incredible investment for people. So I thought, well, how do I do this that gives me more interlacing play with them and not cost as much money? And that's, like I said, I came up with the Rich and Powerful Leaders Academy, where they see me in a very small group twice a month. And then depending on their level, they also can see me alone once a month. And so think about that. That's almost a weekly cadence. And that is required because, I love what one of my clients said the other week. She's like, I feel like I'm knitting fog. She told me I could use that because I was like, oh my God, I love that, because it's exactly what this looks like. Because think about, it used to be easier to command the room. And you can say room for your audience. Now you're calibrating, which means that there is this constant interplay and the requirement for you to continuously align and realign. Now that's going to go away after a fashion. It's just because it's all new right now, and we haven't really gotten our arms totally around what the new model is going to look like. However, it's always going to be part of the conversation, because marketing isn't just going to be delivering the message and leaving. It's already moved into a conversation, whether people have realized it or not. So I could tell you different stories about this, and I'll just go into little teeny tiny snippets, because I think you understand that there's something that you can be thinking, and I'm just going to make this up. It's May 1st. I'm thinking this, and by June 15th, it's already out of date. That cycle wasn't as quick as it was before. Another way I can look at this is that on the flip side, right? It's like information overload. Like, think about going into AI and asking it 3 questions. It can give you 47 pages of information depending on the questions that you answered. How do you have time to integrate that? How do you have time to employ and take action on that? I was in AI the other day and I was asking it something about these, like what would make it really impactful. And I was like, I want to tell story, but I don't know how do I want to tell story. And it came up with maybe short vignettes. And I was like, oh, that's an idea. Look at me. I'm not doing it. This is my first foray, by the way, and I'm not doing it. Maybe it's not mine. You don't know until you try. I'm not doing it, by the way. Okay, so we tried. But I asked AI, I said, how much of your feedback, in OpenAI is actually implemented? And it's 5%. So only 5%. So think about it. We've gotten all these ideas and all this information, pages and pages and reams, and we've validated ourselves, quote unquote. Maybe we feel pretty good, but then we put it aside and we just like don't do anything with it. And we move on. Why are we even wasting our time, right? This is the same kind of thing. If you're thinking about leadership and it's unbundling, right? Well, we're all leaders in some way, shape, or form. And so if we're all leaders in some way, shape, or form, and we're really excited about leading with presence and recalibrating and that power is fluid, what does that mean for us? Think about it. Think about what it really means for us, because if we go into the signatures right now, I think that would be really helpful because it does have different meaning based on what signature you are. So your unique leadership frequency. If you haven't taken your star map to success.com and answered those 12 questions, go ahead and go there and get one of your 6 signatures, because this is energetic. This is about presence. This is about your unique leadership style. And so for you, wise strategist, you can orchestrate the systems of the new model. Think about that. Think about you like, okay, there's a new model out there, and oh, wait, I can actually put the systems around it. You love leading with structure. People trust you because your frameworks work, because you are so grounded and you're going to test it and you're going to bring it to the nth degree on that. Intuitive visionary is not good at this, by the way, but a wise strategist is. You offer stability in chaos. Now, for you on the flip side, intuitive visionary, you channel and communicate what's next. So lead with your voice. Say things that others are afraid to say. Your vision is your strategy. For you, collaborative explorer, you build new forms of the collective. So you lead by gathering. You can create community safety. And you are that relational amplifier, which is really exciting. For you, ruling warrior, you want to take bold and necessary action to dismantle the old. So you're going to be very active, but you can also move the collective forward. Just stay aligned. For you, creative superstars, share stories that shape the soul leadership. So again, you're going to lead with story. Your lived experience can become a movement when you tell it in that truthful, soulful, brave, vulnerable way. And for you, loving alchemist, you lead through resonance and receptivity and trust. So you lead through your emotional depth. Your presence transforms the space. I love this. You're the heart of any container. So when we look at this and we say, okay, what does it mean to be that embodiment of the leader, that recalibration, that commanding presence, without being that performative, command authoritative person? Let's do a quick embodiment exercise. Let's go ahead and stand really tall or sit really tall. Let's inhale slowly and exhale. When you inhale again, I want you to imagine a golden light pouring into the top of your head. And then imagine that light filling the space around you as you inhale and you exhale. And you're breathing. Then you ask, what do I need to lean in alignment today? And then you just listen. That's just a quick way to be in leadership. Because when we look at the rise of quiet authority, I had a client come to me and she was terrified of showing up without a full script. Now, this woman works with Microsoft and some other companies that are just really like big, huge companies. She works for the Fortune 50. She always wanted to be prepared when she walked into the room. Of course she did. And it took me a while for her to be able to accept that she could lead from her experience, that it was about what's in the room. She even said the agenda's in the room. I'm like, yes, those are not my words. Those are her words. And she got to really embody that. And once she did, she moved from being that over-prepared, having a script, having a full agenda, to being able to lead people from where they were at that moment to where they needed to be. And so this is that rise of quiet authority. She wasn't becoming a better leader. She was becoming more true to herself. That's the new alpha. So let's think of the takeaways here, right? So the new era leader is energetically clean, embodied in truth, fluent in intuition, impact, and influence, and willing to dismantle his or her own internal patterns before leading others. What does new leadership look like? It looks like running your team from intuition and from clarity of definition in roles and responsibilities. It looks like marketing or communicating from truth, not pressure. It looks like structuring your business around your energetic capacity versus your schedule. It looks like collaborating without compromising who you are and what you want, without losing your voice. And it looks like leading from soul and strategy and your intuitive success signature. So what's the mapping here? You want to let go of that performative mask, that controlling of every detail, leading through fear or urgency or dominance. You will no longer want to equate worth with productivity. And you don't need to be either the smartest or the most prepared in the room. Instead, you want to have that calibration from the energies, not the volume. You want to use ritualized rhythms and cadence and tempo instead of schedules and routines. You want to be spacious and offer silence for your decision making so that you come to the decision through your intuition. You want community-powered solutions versus just this systemic, solution-based model. And you want vision clarity over vision perfection, the old 80-20 rule. So just ask yourself, am I leading from fear or from frequency? Who am I performing for? What would I change if I fully trusted myself? These are really sexy questions. Just let them roll forth as you bring this. I'm going to close the podcast down, as you bring this to, the end of the receiving of this information. Because again, it's in the receptivity and then what you do with it, what really matters, right? So here's the thing. You don't have to become someone new. You want to become fully you. I'm going to say that again. You don't have to become someone new. You have to become fully you. And that's the leadership that the world is begging for. So again, if you haven't taken your quiz yet, go ahead to the quiz, answer those 12 questions. It's at yourstarmaptosuccess.com. Get your signature. Go ahead and go into the listen notes, and it will be right in the show notes for this list so that anytime we drop a new podcast in this series, you'll get it. And what you want to do is open yourself up to the collapse and to the letting go. Because the next we're going to do is we're going to do the collapse of the coaching industry. Then we're going to go do publishing. Then we're going to do marketing. And then we're going to do 2 wealth looks. So until next time, you're not here to follow the old leadership playbook. You're here to write the new one. And your soul already knows the way. And as always, thank you so much for listening and rating and reviewing and for sharing with friends. Till next time, happy soul tidings.
Thank you for listening, and stay tuned for more ways to use the stars strategically to align with your soul purpose, reclaim your power, and increase your prosperity. Please rate and review your favorite episodes, and remember to check out my website at kimwoods.com for my latest forecasts, articles, and offerings. To find out your intuitive success signature, take my 12-question Do You Know, Like, and Trust Yourself quiz and find out how you're living your stars at yourstarmaptosuccess.com. I've so enjoyed our time together, as it's filled with the power of the stars plus strategy to clear the pathway to your success. Until next time, happy soul tidings.